Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Murray with SpotOn Productions, and I'm the host of the SpotOn Spotlight podcast, where we have candid conversations with leaders in business. Today, I'm really excited about our guest, Dakota Beerman. He and I have known each other for about 3 years now, been through some coaching and connection groups together, and an incredibly interesting guy. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with him. So, Dakota, welcome to the SpotOn Spotlight, sir.
What's up, Ian? I'm excited. I'm ready to have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did your background in a family business, working with your dad for a little bit, kind of influence your passion and leadership for the coaching that you have today?
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up in the family business, worked for my dad, and our business is called, or was, still is, I'm just no longer there, which I'll tell you about in a second, but Luring Glass. And so we did custom shower glass work. So you remodel your bathroom, we'd put glass on top of your brand new beautiful tile, and we'd show that off and all that good stuff. But I started in the business when I was like 19, 20, 33 now, so like long time in the business. Took a little hiatus, but was there for over a decade. Got to see the business from the ground up. Can't take a ton of credit. My dad totally steered the ship and did a lot of cool stuff. But I think getting to be a part of that for a long time was super cool. And then towards the end of my time there, my last 4 or 5 years, got to be, we called the role the integrator role, which is an EOS language we might talk a little bit about, but
Yeah.
really got to oversee some of the main functions of the business, from sales, operations, and some finance stuff. So early on, there was like a little bit of everything. I was installing, I was receiving material, I was talking to customers, I was doing accounting, which I should never do. But when you're starting out, you just you do what you
Do
have
it
to do.
all.
So totally got to see everything from the ground up. Really cool experience. Got to do it with my dad, which was super sweet. And really for me, I don't know if you asked this, so maybe I'm skipping ahead,
No,
but
you're good.
for me, I fell in love with coaching from personally receiving coaching. So when you're in a leadership role, it's lonely, it's confusing, you're trying to solve problems, figure things out real time,
Yeah.
and it's hard, it's lonely, it's scary. And so receiving coaching myself, I've always loved being told where I suck. I just love knowing where those gaps are and how can I get better, how can I improve, and fell in love with the process. And then you and I were in a group together,
Yeah.
started to get some reps coaching, had a knack for it, really loved it. And from there, just I think, the entrepreneurial adventure intrigued me, got me excited. And then at the beginning of the year, started launching my own coaching business after, realizing this is kind of a direction that I feel like I love, I'm passionate about, and I'm good at. So that's a little bit about me.
I'll say you're very good at coaching. You do a great job, really helping kind of peel back layers, especially in some of those deeper self discovery conversations about figuring out where your gaps are and how you can improve. So I definitely think you're very well qualified for the career path you're on. You mentioned EOS. You and I talk about EOS a lot. Having worked in a business, we run on EOS. Uh, how's that been a game changer in your operations role, and how does that help? How does EOS help bring structure to the way you thought about values and people development?
Values, people development. Okay. So EOS for me, when I started into a leadership role at Alluring Glass, we immediately started implementing EOS. And for me, it was super helpful to have language and have it's called operating system.
Mm-hmm.
It legit gives you a system for how to think about your business. So it just led to a ton of organization within the business, and knowing each function and its purpose, as well as creating clarity in what the roles are for each person within the company. And we were a growing company at the time. We were, 14, 15 people when I started implementing EOS, and now it's up to like 25, 28 people. So
It's huge.
how do you scale a team from mid-teens to mid-20s was like a whole process. And EOS gave us language, it gave us a process, and it gave us clarity on how to get there. And I would say, what I see is that leaders, and that's transition from like the business being dependent so much on the leader to where then you start spreading out responsibility to like multi-level leadership and managers is a whole process. I mean, it's hard and it takes a long time, but EOS helped bridge that gap between the business being dependent on just me or my dad, and then we were able to spread the leadership responsibilities out into another level and also be able to get the same consistent results that we were getting before. So it helped us bridge that gap. It helped us make that transition. The thing that there's a gap in EOS, which implementers are probably gonna, if they watch this, Kevin or somebody's gonna get pissed at me for saying this, but one of the things that's really unique about the coaching that I've gotten into is the one-on-one really helps with the leader's personal journey. So you'll probably hear me say this at the end, but I really think the bottleneck of any business is the leader. And so if the leader isn't growing, I don't think the business will either. That's personal belief of mine. So um, where I get to come in and what I love to do now is work with the individual leader on their personal growth and development so that they're able to take the business to the next level. So it's a little bit about EOS, a little bit about one-on-one, and some of the differences.
So EOS really one of the things on that VTO is about values, and how do you use those values? How is that an important part of people development when you're looking to coach and develop people? You went from mid-teens to mid-20s. How are you using values in that people development process?
Yeah, so um, early on, I guess we'll talk a little bit about how to come up with values, but once you come up with them and you get them kind of locked in, you can use them. I mean, we use them in everything from hiring people and finding the right fit for the company to managing people and, what, how to like critique them a little bit more clearly or how to encourage them a little bit more clearly based on what the values are and how to fire people. And then I think building a culture really stems from the values that you create and building a team around those values. So it kind of becomes a unifying central point around which the company and its culture and its team revolve around.
So what is a value? We talk about values, but in the I value kindness, but in a business context, what is a core value? How would you define that? And why is that so important to a business?
The values are the principles or beliefs or things that really communicate what's most important to the team. And they stem directly from the leader or the leaders and kind of distill all the way down through the team. But it kind of gives the team an identity. This is who we are as a team. And when you have a team of 20 plus people and beyond, I mean, it becomes even more important the bigger you get. What is the thing that unifies the team together? And I would say those principles, beliefs, those types of things that unify the team, being able to define them and make sure they're clear can be kind of a bonding point. So a value is what's most important. And then I guess I talked a little bit more about uh, why they're important.
That's
If I
good.
can go more
So
into that.
when you're talking about then the people, you mentioned using values to hire, reward, terminate people based on that. What happens when there's a mismatch between an employee and a company's core values? And do you have a good example of that?
The short answer is tension. So when you really value something, I'll give you an example in a second, but when you really value something and somebody else doesn't value it, it does not matter how good they are at their job. You will feel tension. An example of this is somebody who has a high value for doing like top notch quality work versus somebody who wants to just have fun doing the work are going to be in constant tension because that person who is like, we have to be the best, they, and then they see somebody who's just like kind of having fun, relaxed. They don't care how quick they go. They
Yeah.
just want to enjoy the process. There's going to be a huge amount of tension. And so I have had experience where we've had guys on the team who um, feel like people who are having fun are not working hard or don't care. And then the vice versa is true, where the person who's having fun is like, man, the high performer, whatever, they just care way too much. Like it is not that big of a deal, you know? And so the short answer is you end up with tension on the team and you feel that as a leader. The leader almost can sometimes feel like a referee in those situations. That might be like a good indicator that you have some value mismatches if on your team you feel like you're playing referee between two different people.
So if you have a values mismatch between an employee and the company values, what do you do from a leader perspective? How do you work through that?
If you have a mismatch in values with somebody, I would kind of processing that real time, but I think um, first, I think it's defining what's valuable to you. Like, what are your values? Sometimes we feel tension, we're not really sure where it's coming from. So, the first part is making sure it's clear what your values are. And then the next step is being able to communicate that to the person who you have tension with. And then I think genuinely being curious what their values are and seeing if there's a match. I do believe that in the long run, if there is tension, if there is mismatch, it will lead to burnout, either on your end or their end, and it'll end up not being a great fit. But if you're able to communicate them well um, and clearly, the person may find that, yeah, I resonate with that. But if they don't, I would beware because time's probably running out for that relationship. Even if they're the best person at their job, I've just seen over time, it can end up being not a great fit for you or for them.
So is that where somebody might face a termination event and they're probably not surprised that that was coming if you truly live those core values in your business, they probably know that they're not fitting in well with those because they're feeling that tension. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you communicate them clearly, they're defined, they make sense to you and to the other person, and you're checking in on those things. Like this kind of gets practical, but we would talk about them. We talk about our core values, at least when I was at Allure, we'd talk about them when we're hiring. We talk about them in performance reviews, and we'd actually grade somebody on how they're living up to those values. So if somebody's consistently not living up to the values that you set for the company, you'll start to see over time. I mean, it could be quick, it could take a year, it could take longer, but over time you're going to start to see how, they're not living up to those values, and partly it might be because they don't value them themselves.
I will say we've seen that in our own business where we use the people analyzer tool from EOS, which really helps you kind of just quickly assess based on the core values of the company, how do people fit in with those values? And every time we see a decline in a lot of those values, it usually ends up where there's a separation just because it's not a good fit anymore for that person in the organization. So, what are some
Yep.
practical ways you talked about using them to do hiring? What are some practical ways to integrate core values into that recruiting process? So you're trying to do better alignment with a candidate from the very beginning, hopefully to stave off some of those potential mismatch tension issues down the road.
Yeah, I think the way to bring them into the recruiting process is I would add them to the job description. If these are the most important things for your team to have, um, an example might be like if doing excellent, high quality work is a core value for you and your team, having that as a part of the recruiting process is as important as a key responsibility. So when you're digging into a key responsibility, you're asking them questions about their experience with that responsibility. How many years have they done it? What problems have they solved using whatever that key responsibility is? Same thing for core values. I would be asking questions about if high quality work, I would ask them, what do you think about high quality work? How important is that to you? Can you give me some examples? Can you tell me a story about how that's showed up for you in your work in the past? So, the same way you would think about the responsibilities that you're curious about and investigating, I would do the same thing for values, and I'd have them right on the job description.
That's a great point. Get them out there. I haven't seen that very often. That's a really interesting approach to it. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
they've done the kind of interview process. You decide to hire them. Let's look at training and onboarding. How do you integrate somebody into your culture based on values? I know when you and I have talked in the past, you've got this training model of educate, simulate, evaluate. Can you kind of unpack what that looks like in real world training scenarios?
Sure. Let me talk about educate, simulate, evaluate, and then put it in that context. And then I'll show you how core values kind of
Yeah.
come to the surface during that process. So, educate, simulate, evaluate is kind of a catchy phrase that we've used when training guys because, or the way that it shows up is educate would be getting the knowledge into their brain. So, educate's really for the head. Simulate, I would say, is for the hands. So, it's where they actually have an opportunity to practice whatever it is that they've been hired to do. So, where they're actually engaging physically with the process. And then evaluate is, I would say, it's for the heart. And the reason that I get there is because evaluate is where you and the person that you've hired are creating confidence within the person and belief that they can do the job at the level that you expect them to. So, educate for the head, simulate for the hands, evaluate for the heart. The way that core values show up is as somebody goes through the training process, um, are they displaying the core values that you've defined for the company? So, an example, when I was at a Learning Glass, we had a core value that was training for tomorrow. The idea being is that we want people who always want to get better. The way that this would surface in a positive way is when they were training, they would be engaged. They're probably asking a lot of questions,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just kind of showing up prepared to learn. The way that this core value would be absent or might be an issue over time is if they show up unprepared, they're not very engaged, they're kind of waiting for you to tell them what to do. There isn't much of an eagerness to try and get better. So that's an example of how a core value is going to show up in the training process.
Are there opportunities to coach around that, or if you start seeing those things, is it kind of a warning sign that it's probably not going to go well long term?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a data point. I think it's something that you want to make note of and see if it continues to come up and be a pattern. But I don't want to, I'm not a believer in kind of the fixed mindset kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
that would say um, people can't change because I think they can.
Okay, that's good. So around that coaching then and coaching leadership, when you're coaching teams, what patterns or challenges do you tend to see that surface around value alignment?
The biggest challenge that I see when it comes to creating core values is that we go for aspirational values, things that we want to be true about ourselves, versus discovery of core values. I
Interesting.
am yeah, I'm a big proponent of discovery. I think you each of us were made a certain way, and then our experiences kind of shape who we are, what we care about. And I think it's much better approach to discover what's true about you versus aspirationally, what do I want to be true? Not again, fixed mindset kind of thing here. You can change. That can happen. But when you're using your values in the present, I think it's super important to be aware of who you are now, who you are today, and even it's something to be proud of. It's not something like values tend to be a very positive thing. So again, discovery over aspiration, I think is huge.
I think that's a good, really good point. I know when we were going through our process, it was really important to say what's true about who we are today that's really helped us be successful and things that we want to kind of enshrine in the organization to continue that success as we move forward. Because to your point, I think it's great to have aspirational look forward on stuff. But when it comes to values, if you don't know who you are, it's kind of hard to continue down that path of how we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it's also shows up when it's a team because you're trying to combine multiple values.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it's multiple people that you're pulling values from, um, yeah, I think it's just more important to look at the overlap than what all however many leadership team people there are, what all of you hope to be true or wish to be true.
What happens when the leadership team is not aligned on values?
Oh man. Oh, tension
Back
again.
to
I
tension.
I think it's back to tension. I think yeah. I mean, again, it's for my belief is that you misaligned values lead to burnout over time. So if there is misalignment, doesn't mean that you can't kind of struggle through it for a period of time. But if you are misaligned, it could be a bad sign that it's like not a great match. You want to work with people where your values are aligned, and you're going to go further and faster where there's alignment in those values. Not that you're the same person. You want disagreement, you want conflict. Those things are
Mm-hmm.
healthy to work through as a team. But at a deep core thing, if the values are misaligned, there's going to be problems.
So long term, does that lead to a toxic culture? Does that flip the culture around when you've got people that are not aligned?
Yes, I believe that that is true. I think as it plays out, there is toxicity that occurs when there's misalignment. One of these kind of interesting principles that I've experienced when being a part of a team is that when you experience pressure from the outside, it bonds people together. When you experience pressure from the inside, it tears people apart. So a team that's experiencing a ton of internal tension is going to have a propensity to divide amongst themselves. When there's pressure from the outside, like sales are low, what are we going to do about it? A team that's well bonded around core values is going to figure it out.
That's a really cool insight. I like that. I'm gonna have to steal that one. Outside versus
There you
inside
go.
pressure. That's really cool.
There you go. That one's free.
That's my nugget of the day. So, can you share a coaching insight or technique that has really had the biggest impact when helping companies realign around core values? If there is that mismatch, how can you coach through that, or is there a technique to really help you get everybody realigned around the core values?
Yeah, the exercise that I do, I'll play this out. How I would do it one on one if I were working with somebody is tons of exercises out there, I'm sure, a ton of free resources.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that I've seen the best is identifying core values from a list of 100 or more values. Because values, as a leader, one of the challenges too is like you don't want to be boxed in. You don't want to say, I only care about 5 things. The exercise, though, in having 100 values, all of which are good, is you learn to prioritize the things that are most important. And I think that prioritization is a really important skill to develop as a leader. And going through that and identifying out of 100, what are the 5 things that are most important? Like, honesty, integrity, you know, uh, a great, what, I don't know what the word is for like doing a great job. High quality is
Yeah.
probably the right word. All of those things are good things, but which ones are going to be the most important? So by prioritizing those things, that's how I would do it one on one. If I were doing it with a team, I would probably have them all do it individually. And then I would do some sort of reflective exercise where the team together is seeing what each person picked and seeing are there any values that are opposed to each other. Like an example, here's an example that I've experienced: generosity, giving away, versus like um, greed is not probably not the right word. Stewardship, saving, something
Mm-hmm.
like that, where we need to preserve uh, money, save money, versus somebody who wants to give it away. Like those could be at conflict with each other. So I'd have each leader do their own individual prioritization, and then I do some sort of reflective exercise where we can see where there's gaps and where there's overlap so that you become more aware. These are the things that we're definitely aligned on. These are the things that could become sources of tension, and here's why.
I like that. So that seems very much if you don't clearly if you haven't clearly defined values, that's a great way to use your team to come up with them. What about if there is a company with values, but there you just need some realignment amongst the team?
Yeah. So amongst the team, yeah. So the next step of this exercise would be so the next challenge that leaders are going to have around core values is they can be a little bit um, I don't know, esoteric, or they're kind of, I don't know, they just are heady, or I don't know what the right word is. They're hard to distill down into behaviors. So
Okay.
if I say integrity or honesty is a core value for us, and you tell your team that, they're going to be like, yeah, of course, honesty, integrity is important. But the challenge is going to be like, they're not going to know what to do with that. They're just going to be like, okay, cool, we need to be honest. When you start to break it down to what the behavior looks like and you give examples, that's where you start to drive clarity. So for us as a team, what does it look like to be honest? When we go to a job and we make a mistake that we know we're going to have to fix at some point, or the homeowner is going to have to fix at some point, we tell the homeowner. That's what we do. So what you're starting to show is a behavior that somebody on your team can actually do from the value of honesty. Um, what I would do with a leadership team is get all the core values together that we're aligned on, and then I would write out 3 behavior examples that you could teach to your team, so that when they hear the value, they think of the behavior and they know what to do with it.
I like that a lot because I think it is very easy to have these like values that live up in the cloud, and you're like, yeah, great, that's a value. What does that mean? I like that idea of really having that distilled down into 2 to 3 behaviors for each value that says this is how we live it out to make it more
Yeah.
relatable. That's awesome.
Yeah. Core values tend to be something that what I see at least is that you put them on your website and you put like a cool graphic behind them, and they look neat, and like you have to have them to be a business, I guess. But what I love is when they become super practical, tactical, and like you lead your team from them. Your team loves the clarity, knowing what they
Hmm.
do with these things, and that it really can become a source of identity for the team.
Especially if they're going to be held accountable to them too. I think that clarity is probably very empowering.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, for leaders that are listening today, what's a simple step that they can take in the next week to reinforce their company's core values in their team culture?
All right. I think this is a fun exercise
Okay.
if you're up for a challenge.
Yeah.
So, what I would recommend is wherever your core values are at now, if you haven't done any of these exercises, perfect. Share your core values just as they are with your team, and then ask them, what does this mean to you? And then shut up. Just listen to what they say and make notes. What does this value mean to me? And then reflect on that. Does this match what I believe the core values mean? What's great about this exercise is, one, is it's humbling, and two, it actually helps you become more aware of where you get to communicate better. And so I would do that exercise to start, figure out where are there gaps. And then from there, I would go through the exercise that I talked about, which is like breaking down the behaviors that
Hmm.
you want to see, what they actually mean to you, and then practice again, share them with your team again, and help them understand what it looks like to live these values out. I can't remember the original question, but hopefully that those are a
That's it.
couple
Yeah.
thoughts.
Just what's something you can
All
do
right.
to kind of reinforce those? I think that's great advice because sometimes, as leaders, we get so like, oh, yeah, we know what these are. But to get your people to sit there and say, well, this is what I think it means, you're like, oh, there's a mismatch there. Or, no, that's exactly what we were, trying to communicate.
Yes.
So kind of even just a pulse check on your values. And then that idea of what are the behaviors we, can share that model what that looks like. That's great. All
Yeah,
right.
the
Go
oh
ahead.
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the advanced level is when so we started doing this at Alluring, which was having the team share where they saw the values, what behaviors they saw. So like we'd have a 30-minute meeting on a Friday, and we would after the values are communicated clearly and people understand them, the advanced level is to start actually encouraging your team based on the behaviors that you see that go stem straight from the values of the team. So an example would be we had a value of optimistic, and so having a good attitude and being optimistic about the future. When something would go wrong on a job and one of our craftsmen um, interacted with the customer in a positive way, they fixed the problem, they didn't get ruffled, they found their way through it. Somebody may do a shout out for that and be like, Tim, you were optimistic. You there was a mistake. You had to solve it. You didn't lose your mind. You figured it out. That's optimistic. Good job. When you start to encourage them, you'll start to see the team actually takes pride in behaving according to the values. It's really cool.
That's very cool. Great information today. I want to wrap it up with my favorite question. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever gotten or that you like to give to other people?
Best business advice for sure is the leader is the biggest bottleneck to the business. And it's humbling, but it's also like the opportunity beyond. This is why I love coaching. This is why I got into it. It's because um, as the leader grows and their ability to lead more and bigger and whatever, the company thrives. And that's what I've seen in different organizations. So my biggest word of wisdom is if you lead something, fall in love with the journey of learning and growing yourself. And that's the best impact you'll have on the people that follow you. And I want leaders to thrive because I think the community, our culture just gets better and better from there.
That's really good advice. I could probably work on that myself a little bit too. We get so set in our ways. We get so like in the grind. We're like, oh, I should really see where I have some gaps and could work on that for myself. So, thank you for sharing that. So Dakota, we're wrapping up at time here. So your company is Legacy Build. You do one-on-one leadership coaching and some group coaching as well. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
So I think the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn right now. I'm pretty active there. I do have a website. It's definitely under construction, but you can see some of my blog posts and some of my thinking there. But to connect, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Would love to meet whomever is listening.
And what's the website URL just so we can follow along as you continue to build it out?
Yeah, it's just dakotabeerman.com. Real
Oh,
easy,
easy enough.
simple.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Dakota, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated your insight on values, and I love that pressure from the outside versus the inside. I think that's really probably one of my top takeaways from today. We
Love it.
will. I'll see you again soon. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Ian.
Yep.